Have you ever paused in the quiet moments to wonder what truly remains of us when everything we believed defined who we are begins to crumble? When the titles, accomplishments, and identities that we've carried like badges of honor throughout our lives lose all meaning, what are we left with? Perhaps the greatest challenge of maturity isn't simply the passage of years, nor the slow fade of physical vitality, but rather the refusal or even the inability to accept that life's rules have shifted. We step, almost unprepared and hesitant, into the latter half of our existence, and suddenly, the familiar frameworks we once relied on no longer hold. This is the insight that Carl Jung offered, a reflection, a caution, almost a silent prayer for those who dare to observe life as it truly unfolds. Picture this scene: the early hours before dawn. The world outside your window is draped in shadow, the house still, everything quiet. And then, a peculiar realization hits you: you cannot sleep. It is not the body's restlessness, it is the restless stirrings of the soul, the whispers of something inside that has long been waiting for acknowledgement. You glance around the room. Everything appears intact, orderly, as though nothing has changed. Yet beneath the surface, within the corridors of your own consciousness, cracks have begun to form. What once drove your ambitions now feels heavy. What once ignited your desires now leaves you questioning their purpose. Perhaps for the first time, you are confronted with a disorienting awareness. You are no longer certain who you truly are beneath the roles and expectations. This narrative is an invitation, a call to embark on that quiet and intimate journey inward. It is not about shallow self-help formulas, nor prepackaged advice that promises instant transformation. It is about diving deep into the unconscious, about relinquishing the heroic mask and confronting the human being underneath. We are going to explore what Jung referred to as the afternoon of life, that stage in which societal masks no longer fit, where success no longer satisfies, and time itself calls us back to the inner landscape. We will address the crises that inevitably arise, the sense of emptiness, the fatigue that accumulates even when surrounded by all you have ever sought, the subtle unease that lingers despite outward success. But we will also explore the rediscovery, the reclamation of meaning, a renewed approach to living, one less tethered to external validation and more rooted in authenticity and inner truth. Age is inconsequential. Whether you are 30, 40, 50 or beyond, if a subtle transformation is taking place within you, quietly yet profoundly, you may already be ready for this conversation. The journey that begins now is an inward one, and within it lies the opportunity to discover that everything you have ever sought outside has, in reality, been waiting for you within all along. Take a deep breath, let go of tension, walk with me. There comes a time in life when mirrors cease to merely reflect the surface of your face and begin revealing the passage of time etched across it. Time is impartial, precise, and relentless. It carves lines with the meticulousness of a blind sculptor, not for aesthetic appeal, but as a reminder that youth is a season, fleeting and impermanent. Clinging to youth beyond its natural course can become a subtle form of self-sabotage. Jung described this as the illusion of permanence, the desperate attempt to continue living by the rules of life's morning even as the sun begins its descent. Those who impose the morning's laws onto the afternoon of life pay a toll with their very souls. Perhaps you have already sensed this truth. Society presents youth as a kind of salvation, a currency of worth. Cosmetic medicine promises the restoration of what has passed. Social media glorifies the act of performing vitality, of mimicking the appearance of eternal youth. Yet behind these spectacles lies a profound fear, the fear of confronting ourselves inwardly. Genuine growth demands courage. Conscious aging requires boldness, the courage to admit that what once functioned now fails. The courage to acknowledge that behind each achievement may reside a quiet exhaustion, a question unanswered, a scream stifled by habit. How many of us attempt to cheat time? Through surgeries, restrictive diets, relationships with younger partners, not for love, but to mimic youth. To act as though we can stave off aging by performing it, by consuming it, by inhabiting it like a costume. Yet, as Elliot Jacques observed, the emptiness and lack of genuine pleasure that emerge in midlife are recurring patterns, attempts to outrun time, to deny the inevitable inward turn of the journey. In doing so, most fail to recognize that the race is not against years, but against themselves. Jung called this the prison of the persona, the social masks we don in youth, useful for opening doors. For navigating the world eventually become shackles that distance us from our true selves. It is akin to wearing clothing that no longer fits, insisting it still appears appropriate. By midlife, many have achieved status, accolades, even recognition, but internally, a void remains. Why? Because life spent outwardly demands inward reorientation. Jung was unequivocal. The second half of life requires a new stance. If youth is the time of external conquest, maturity is the arena of inner confrontation against constructed self-images, inflated egos, and the illusion that amassing more of the same can subvert time. Have you felt this? Repeating patterns that no longer serve, maintaining appearances while your soul quietly pleads for a new approach. Bernardo Kastrup, a contemporary philosopher, remarked, "Western culture excels in the first half of life's game, but when the rules change, we falter." many persist in pursuing power, status, and consumption, only to eventually discover that these efforts lead nowhere. Then begins the true crisis, not a crisis of age, but of identity. And perhaps, just perhaps, this is life's most powerful opportunity, to cease the race, abandon pretense, and begin living authentically for the first time. As we continue this inward journey, it becomes evident that midlife is not a moment for denial but for profound recognition. The world we constructed in youth, filled with ambitions, accolades, and societal approval, begins to feel hollow. The applause that once validated us no longer resonates in the depths of our being. What remains are the echoes of experiences lived externally, while the inner self quietly waits for attention. It is a paradox. Externally, everything may appear stable: career, family, possessions, but internally, a quiet unrest stirs. The soul begins to whisper, demanding a realignment with what is authentic, not what has been performed. Consider the patterns of our earlier years: constant striving, unyielding efforts to prove our worth, and relentless engagement with the external world. These behaviors, so necessary in the morning of life, now often feel like chains. Jung emphasized that the true challenge of the afternoon of life is learning to release them, to acknowledge that the hero's journey, which once served us, no longer fits the context. The masks that once opened doors now obstruct vision. They separate us from the raw and unpolished essence of who we are. And yet, letting go is daunting. The ego resists. The mind clings to familiar scripts, even when they no longer align with our inner truth. We witness this struggle everywhere. Individuals persist in endless cycles of consumption, chasing status symbols, appearances, and fleeting pleasures, believing that they can defy the inevitable internal shifts. Relationships with younger partners, obsessive fitness regimes, cosmetic interventions, even compulsive work habits become tools to postpone the recognition of change. Yet beneath these efforts lies the unspoken fear. The fear of turning inward and confronting the truths that the soul quietly harbors. Real transformation requires courage, but not the bravery associated with public achievement or worldly conquest. It demands a more intimate, unsettling courage to confront one's own internal void, to embrace the truths that have been ignored or suppressed for decades. This is where Jung's concept of individuation becomes pivotal. Individuation is not merely a psychological term. It is the sacred process of reconciling the conscious self with the unconscious, of bridging the gap between who we have been and who we are yet to become. The masks fall, the roles that once guaranteed safety and approval lose their power, and what emerges from beneath, long suppressed and overlooked, begins to call out desires, talents, memories, unhealed wounds, and latent potentials, all demanding acknowledgement. It is a dialogue between the self we thought we were and the self that seeks authenticity. It is a conversation that is both intimate and terrifying. Many confuse this internal awakening with existential crises or depressive episodes, yet it is neither. It is an invitation to profound self-knowledge, to reconnect with the invisible forces that sustain us. The modern world, with its obsession with productivity, youth, and outward validation, conditions us to flee from silence, to avoid introspection. But the silence of the soul is not an enemy, it is a guide. To heed its call is to embark on a journey inward, a journey that is essential for preserving vitality and achieving fulfillment in later life. Those who ignore it pay a steep price: diminished energy, shallow relationships, the sensation that life is losing its color, and a creeping weight of time that feels increasingly oppressive. Conversely, embracing this inward path reveals a new form of richness, a wealth unmeasured by titles, bank accounts, or social approval. It is a richness measured by depth, by moments of quiet reflection, by presence, and by the subtle wisdom that emerges not from books, but from lived experience. This is the difference between aging while clinging to youth and maturing into an existence aligned with inner truth. Energy once devoted to outward conquest is redirected towards self-understanding. As the invisible begins to guide our actions, passions long forgotten are rekindled. We begin to paint, to write, to cultivate, to read attentively, to silence devices, to meet another's gaze fully, to experience simple acts with profound meaning. It is as though the soul, long ignored, whispers, "Thank you for listening." The afternoon of life, as Jung described, is not a decline. It is a transition, a profound passage that demands both acknowledgement of loss and receptivity to revelation. The revelations that emerge in midlife are often subtle yet transformative, illuminating dimensions of self previously invisible. They are the truths that have always existed within us, patiently awaiting recognition. The invisible aspects of our being, the spark that never extinguished. The latent wisdom, the innate capacity for love and presence come into view for the first time. In this stage, silence becomes an instrument of clarity. Not merely the absence of noise, but the meaningful stillness of reflection, of paths not taken, desires long suppressed, and opportunities overlooked. Jung believed that confronting this silence was essential for health and maturity. Many neuroses and depressive tendencies that appear after 40, he argued, stem from a refusal to engage in this inward journey. When we cling to old patterns, ignoring the soul's call, life loses its vitality, relationships flatten, and the passage of time becomes oppressive. Yet for those who heed this call, a different world unfolds, one where presence, depth, and authenticity replace superficiality and performance. This inward journey is a reclamation of self, not merely a return to forgotten dreams, but a conscious reconnection with them. The child we once were, the artist, the lover, the spiritual seeker, all fragments long suppressed begin to emerge. Reconciliation with these aspects creates wholeness. It is the restoration of integrity, the reunification of fragmented selves, what Jung referred to as psychic wholeness. As we delve deeper into this inner odyssey, it becomes clear that midlife is less about external achievement and more about the intimate confrontation with self. The accomplishments that once defined us, the accolades, the promotions, even the recognition we meticulously pursued, now reveal their impact. They no longer anchor the soul. Instead, a profound question emerges: who am I when all titles, roles, and outward validations fade? This is not a question of ego, but of essence, of stripping away layers accumulated over decades to confront the raw core of being. In youth, we are conditioned to project outwardly. Society teaches us to compete, to strive, to perform, and to conform. The world is a stage, and we are actors memorizing scripts written by cultural expectation. These scripts grant safety, admiration, and purpose until the point where they no longer serve. Midlife challenges us to confront the reality that these external markers, once vital, are now insufficient. We cannot deny the inner stirrings, the subtle, persistent dissatisfaction that whispers in quiet moments. It manifests as restlessness, sleepless nights, fleeting irritability, or a sense of life slipping past unnoticed. This is the soul's subtle insistence, urging us to turn inward. Carl Jung described this period as the afternoon of life, a stage where the masks worn in the morning lose their relevance. Continuing to cling to those masks, the role of the achiever, the provider, the socially successful persona creates internal tension. We might maintain appearances, but the inner self rebels. Many respond with avoidance, more consumption, more superficial engagements, obsessive self-improvement, or attempts to cling to youth. Cosmetic procedures, extreme fitness routines, purchasing power, and even relationships with younger partners become strategies to delay facing the inevitable truth. Life's afternoon demands a new alignment, yet none of these external solutions satisfy the call of the soul. Individuation, Jung argued, is the answer to sacred process of integration. It is a deliberate journey inward, a dialogue between the conscious and the unconscious. The ego, once master of the outwardly projected life, is challenged to step aside and allow deeper truths to surface. What emerges are the hidden dimensions of the self, repressed desires, neglected talents, unresolved grief, and the unspoken questions that have lingered for decades. This is not an abstract concept, it is a tangible experience. The unconscious, long patient, now demands attention. It is as though life itself whispers, "Now is the time to notice me." Many confuse this process with depression, anxiety, or existential crisis, yet it is none of these in essence. It is an invitation. It is the call to acknowledge the life not fully lived, the dreams deferred, the creative impulses postponed, and the inner child long neglected. Modern culture often discourages such reflection, favoring action over contemplation, distraction over stillness. Productivity, social media validation, and relentless engagement become substitutes for inner examination. But the soul's call is relentless. To ignore it is to invite subtle decay, emotional numbness, shallow relationships, lack of fulfillment, and the creeping weight of time. Heeding the call, however, brings a profound transformation. Those who engage in this process discover a wealth invisible to the untrained eye. This richness is not measured in money, social status, or external recognition, but in depth of perception, meaningful presence, and authentic connection. Time once spent on external conquest is redirected to self-understanding. Forgotten passions re-emerge: painting, writing, attentive listening, meaningful conversation, and quiet observation. The small, simple acts become imbued with meaning, a testament to the soul's reclaiming of attention. It is the subtle joy of alignment with one's true self, a quiet yet profound fulfillment. In this transitional phase, the symbolic death becomes crucial. Jung and other thinkers observe that maturation demands the death of the old self, the persona shaped by societal expectation, the ego inflated by external validation, and the clinging to youth and control. This death is not catastrophic, it is liberator. It is the shedding of identities that no longer serve, clearing the space for authenticity to emerge. The process is painful, yes, but it is also enlightening. It is a rite of passage, a necessary transformation that prepares one for genuine maturity. Those who resist this process often experience subtle suffering, frustration, discontent, emptiness, and even psychosomatic manifestations. The unexamined life, Jung warned, returns with a cost. Conversely, Those who confront the internal call gain access to a deeper sense of self. They begin to live with intentionality, guided by the principles of authenticity and inner truth rather than societal expectation. Life becomes richer not because the world changes but because perception deepens. The ordinary becomes extraordinary when viewed through the lens of awareness and presence. Furthermore, this inward shift catalyzes reconnection with forgotten aspects of the self. The artist, the lover, the dreamer, the seeker dimensions long suppressed begin to emerge. The child within, previously silenced by survival and conformity, is gently invited back into awareness. It is a reconciliation with what was deferred, a recognition that authenticity requires embracing all facets of self, including those once hidden. This integration fosters psychic wholeness, the concept Jung termed self-realization or psychic totality. The afternoon of life, therefore, is not a decline but a convergence, an opportunity to reclaim coherence and live fully in alignment with inner truths. As the journey unfolds, the interplay of light and shadow becomes evident. Acceptance of impermanence, acknowledgement of limits, and a readiness to release what no longer serves are essential. Symbolic death of outdated roles does not diminish life. It enhances vitality. By consciously surrendering attachments to image, control, and external validation, the individual creates room for inner flourishing. This conscious engagement with mortality, not fear of it, strengthens life's depth. By dying to the superficial, one awakens to the essential. As the inner journey deepens, one begins to notice the subtle shifts in perception. Life no longer feels like a race to accumulate, to impress, or to secure external validation. Instead, attention turns to the quiet currents beneath the surface, the often ignored whispers of the soul. These whispers manifest in moments of solitude, during a walk in the early morning mist, while watching sunlight filter through leaves, or in the sudden stillness between conversations. What once seemed ordinary now holds meaning. What was overlooked becomes essential. The external world loses its commanding allure, and the internal world emerges as the true arena of growth and understanding. Midlife then is not merely a chronological marker but a psychological threshold. It is the point where superficial achievements, while still relevant, are no longer sufficient to satisfy the deeper hunger for coherence and authenticity. It is when the facade of perpetual productivity begins to feel hollow, and the soul quietly protests against the relentless performance. Many feel anxiety, restlessness, or inexplicable dissatisfaction. This is the soul's insistence, its gentle yet persistent demand: look within. It is time to reconcile with who you truly are. Jung described this as a critical juncture, the afternoon of life, a stage requiring courage and introspection. To engage with this stage is to confront the illusions maintained during youth. The belief that external success equates to inner fulfillment, the conviction that appearing strong is more important than being genuine, and the assumption that life can be controlled by adherence to habitual patterns. The shadows of suppressed desires, unacknowledged grief, and untapped creativity emerge, challenging the comfortable narratives constructed for survival and social approval. It is a confrontation with the self, raw and unmeasured. Resistance to this confrontation is common. Many attempt to recapture youth through external means, obsessive fitness, cosmetic enhancements, or social mimicry. Some seek validation in new relationships or possessions, hoping to fill the growing void. Yet these efforts rarely satisfy because they target the surface rather than the depth. Jung and other thinkers observed that the only true solution is internal engagement, acknowledgement, acceptance, and integration of all aspects of the self, both light and shadow. This process of integration, often referred to as individuation, is not a one-time event but a sustained journey. It requires attentive observation of one's thoughts, emotions, and behaviors, and the willingness to face uncomfortable truths. Old coping mechanisms, once adaptive, may now obstruct growth. Patterns repeated without awareness lose their utility and can become barriers to genuine experience. Recognizing this, the individual begins to question long-held assumptions. Which aspects of myself have I neglected? Which desires have I silenced? What aspects of my life are authentically mine, and which were adopted to please others? The awakening that follows can be both exhilarating and terrifying. As masks fall away, one confronts vulnerabilities, insecurities, and the raw material of one's true self. The inner child, creative impulses, and dormant passions are no longer optional, they demand acknowledgement. This is not a superficial indulgence but a profound reclamation of life that was postponed. The soul, long patient, now seeks active engagement, urging a recalibration of priorities toward authenticity, meaning, and depth. Symbolic death plays a central role in this process. To mature consciously is to allow the death of what no longer serves, outdated identities, unproductive habits, false ideals, and the obsessive pursuit of external validation. This death is liberating rather than catastrophic. Shedding these layers frees energy and attention for what is truly essential, enabling a life aligned with inner truth rather than external expectation. Pain accompanies this process, as it involves loss of familiar roles, illusions of control, and perceived security, but the reward is profound. The emergence of a self rooted in authenticity, depth, and presence. Moreover, this period often catalyzes the rediscovery of passions and talents suppressed during earlier decades. The individual begins to write, create, explore, and engage in activities that resonate deeply. Simple acts, listening attentively, observing nature, cultivating stillness, become sources of joy and meaning. The soul, previously constrained by obligation and performance, now breathes freely, asserting its presence in everyday life. Such engagements are not trivial. They are manifestations of alignment with one's core essence, reminders that life's richness lies not in accumulation but in authentic experience. The second half of life, therefore, is a call to conscious living. It demands a radical shift from outward striving to inward cultivation. The focus moves from accumulation to presence, from control to acceptance, and from performance to authenticity. It is a shift from living according to expectation to living in resonance with inner truth. While society often glorifies youth and productivity, the true measure of maturity lies in awareness, depth, and integration. This is the moment to honor what is real, to embrace impermanence, and to prioritize what truly matters. A profound aspect of this journey is the reconciliation with mortality. Jung suggested that embracing death not as a distant event but as an ever-present reality frees one to live fully. By acknowledging the finite nature of existence, one cultivates clarity, intentionality, and presence. Symbolic death, then, is not fearsome, it is transformative. It allows the release of ego-driven concerns, social pretenses, and the compulsive pursuit of validation. In doing so, the individual discovers the eternal within the consciousness, the inner spark, the quiet wisdom that endures beyond physical limitations. In this light, aging becomes not a decline but an awakening. The afternoon of life is a space of possibility, creativity, and authentic engagement. By turning inward, one accesses dimensions of self previously obscured by social roles, external pressures, and unexamined habits. Vulnerability becomes strength, reflection becomes clarity, and silence becomes a source of profound insight. The process is subtle, gradual, and deeply transformative, offering the opportunity to live with purpose, presence, and integrity. Finally, this inward journey emphasizes the importance of self-compassion. To confront the depths of the self is to encounter imperfection, pain, and regret. Yet in this encounter lies the potential for healing and reconciliation. Recognizing one's humanity, embracing limitations, and valuing the lessons of experience transforms suffering into wisdom. Midlife, therefore, is not merely a stage of crisis, but a gateway to deeper understanding, creativity, and fulfillment. As we reach the threshold of life's later stage, the invitation becomes clear: to live fully, consciously, and authentically. This final passage is not about external achievements, social recognition, or material accumulation. It is about the reclamation of self, the cultivation of presence, and the realization of what truly matters. The masks that once defined identity fall away, revealing the essence beneath the unadorned, authentic, and resilient self. It is here, in this revealed space, that life's deepest treasures are discovered: quiet joy, profound insight, and the freedom to act in alignment with inner truth. The symbolic death that accompanies this stage is transformative. By letting go of outdated roles, suppressed desires, and illusions of control, one makes room for growth, creativity, and genuine engagement. Old patterns, once adaptive, are released, and with them comes the opportunity to embrace what has long been ignored: the childlike wonder, the creative impulses, and the authentic voice that may have been silenced by fear, obligation, or conformity. This shedding is not an end, but a beginning, a rebirth into a life that is intimate, intentional, and deeply meaningful. In practical terms, this transformation often manifests in rediscovered passions and practices. The person who once ignored creativity now writes, paints, or explores new forms of expression. The one who was previously caught in endless busyness finds time for reflection, contemplation, and connection with the world around them. Simple actions, a thoughtful conversation, an attentive gaze, a moment of stillness become acts of profound significance. These are not merely hobbies or diversions. They are expressions of the soul, reclaiming its voice and asserting its presence in the world. Importantly, the process requires courage. Confronting the realities of aging, mortality, and the finite nature of life challenges deeply ingrained fears. Society often promotes denial, the glorification of youth, the obsession with productivity, and the avoidance of vulnerability. Yet it is precisely in facing these realities that liberation is found. By accepting the impermanence of life and the inevitability of change, the individual cultivates clarity, intentionality, and a capacity to live fully in the present moment. Fear, once a controlling force, becomes a teacher, guiding attention toward what is essential. Jung emphasized that the afternoon of life is a critical stage for self-realization. It is a time to reconcile with the accumulated shadows, unresolved tensions, and unacknowledged desires that have silently shaped experience. Integration of these elements leads to wholeness, a state in which past, present, and future coexists in harmonious awareness. The soul, long patient and often silent, now demands acknowledgement, and in responding, one experiences profound relief, renewal, and authenticity. One of the most poignant aspects of this stage is the recognition of mortality. By confronting death, not with fear but with acceptance, one gains freedom. This is not merely the biological reality of aging, but the acknowledgement of life's transience as a guide for conscious living. Symbolic death, letting go of ego-driven ambitions, external validation, and attachments to youth or control, prepares the individual for true engagement with life. In this process, there is no loss but liberation. Space is created for depth, presence, and meaningful connection with oneself and others. Moreover, this stage illuminates the interconnection of all experiences. Joy and sorrow, success and failure, love and loss, all are seen as integral threads in the tapestry of life. Wisdom emerges not from avoidance but from reflection, integration, and understanding. The individual learns that life's richness lies not in what is obtained but in how experience is engaged and interpreted. The capacity for compassion, patience, and empathy expands as one recognizes the universality of human struggle and the shared journey of growth, aging, and transformation. The second half of life also offers the opportunity to redefine purpose. It is a time to evaluate priorities, let go of unnecessary burdens, and cultivate what nourishes the soul. Relationships previously maintained for obligation or social expectation are reconsidered. The emphasis shifts toward authenticity, depth, and meaningful connection. Professional pursuits, once central, may give way to creative, contemplative, or service-oriented endeavors. The measure of success evolves from external metrics to inner fulfillment, coherence, and integrity. This period, while demanding, holds immense beauty. It is an invitation to witness the soul in motion, to honor its needs, and to act in alignment with its guidance. Life is no longer a performance for others but a deliberate, mindful engagement with what is real and essential. The individual who embraces this stage discovers the profound truth that the fullness of life is experienced not through accumulation but through presence, awareness, and authentic expression. Ultimately, the afternoon of life is a sacred space, a time for reflection, for healing, for creativity, and for deep connection. It is a stage in which wisdom emerges naturally from experience, where authenticity becomes both practice and gift, and where the soul can breathe freely. Here, the journey of maturation culminates not in despair but in liberation, the liberation to live fully, to love deeply, and to exist in harmony with one's true self. As you read these words, consider your own path. What elements of yourself have you neglected? Which desires have been postponed or denied? What masks are you still wearing? And what parts of you long to be seen, expressed, and embraced? This is not a call to nostalgia or regret, but to conscious engagement, a gentle, insistent invitation to step into the fullness of your own life. Now, in this moment, the journey is ongoing. The challenges are real, but so too are the rewards. Courage, presence, and authenticity illuminate the way. By embracing the symbolic deaths necessary for growth and the rebirth they allow, one can enter the final chapters of life with dignity, clarity, and depth. Life's richness, previously obscured by distraction, obligation, and habit, becomes accessible. The soul, now heard and honored, guides every choice, action, and thought toward greater coherence and fulfillment. This stage is, in essence, an invitation to live consciously, to move through the world with awareness, to embrace mortality as a guide, and to align action with inner truth. The masks fall, the false narratives dissolve, and the authentic self emerges. Time, once perceived as enemy, becomes a companion, reminding the individual of the preciousness of each moment. The afternoon of life, far from decline, becomes a realm of profound possibility, creativity, and connection, a sacred space in which the soul can finally breathe, express, and flourish. In conclusion, the second half of life is not an ending but a transition, a chance to reclaim authenticity, cultivate presence, and live in alignment with one's deepest values. It is a period of liberation, growth, and profound self-discovery. By embracing this stage fully, acknowledging symbolic deaths, and responding to the soul's call, one can experience life in its richest, most meaningful form. Here, the individual discovers that true fulfillment is not granted by youth, success, or external validation but by conscious engagement with the self, courage to face reality, and the freedom to express one's authentic essence.